Does everybody know what we're doing today? Okay. We're going to start out with the big picture, and then we're going to go down to the small picture. All right, so today we're following, small picture, we're following Willard's New York Brigade. So let's set up the brigade first. Who are the units? So these folks that we're following today are New Yorkers. And I won't try to do the accent. So what I'm telling you is, when I talk about Willard, they're actually starting up here, but fighting down here. Now Carlton does the whole walk. He'll walk you whole, if you come back for the anniversary, you're going down the whole route. I'm not quite that energetic, especially when it's raining. But anyway, they're starting over here, and the Union is facing back behind you, or facing the way that I'm facing. Okay, so the unit consists, as I said, of four units. The brigade, once again, corps, division, brigade, regiment. Regiment, brigade, division, corps. You can see it on this monument, the Pennsylvania monument, right here, all over the place, most of them being regiments. The four regiments: 39th New York, 269 men. I'll get back to them in a minute. 111th New York, 390 men. 125th New York, 392 men. And the 126th New York, 455 men. This is approximately 1,508 men. When I see a number, 111, 125, 126, that automatically tells me that the unit was raised later in the war. I did this program in 2010. That's when this thing was originally written. Now, I went back and added a couple more pages because I wanted to do something different for y'all today, or put in some different information. But I was thinking as I did this program, if you go back and look, 2010, for one thing, I had hair when I did this program. Oh, all the bald guys are like, oh no, you got a lot of hair to me. So the three regiments, 111, 125, 126, specifically enlisted in July of '62, with Lincoln's call for an additional 300,000 volunteers. And they signed up for 3-year enlistments. These three units, 125, 126, 111, all arrived at Harpers Ferry, West Virginia in September of 1862. So keep this in mind. They enlist in July, and by September they're on at an active military post. Now you Gettysburg, I mean you Civil War buffs know where I'm going with this. It's September of 1862, and they're in Harpers Ferry. 3 companies of Hungarians, if you can imagine, and 1 company each of Italians. Can you say that? Italians. Okay. There's your Southern lesson for today. Let's practice it together. Italians. Okay. So they have 1 company of Italians, 1 company of Swiss, who brought their own cheese, right there, full of holes, which the Southerners did not understand. French and Spanish Portuguese, which I suppose means Spain. The 39th was known as the Garibaldi Guards, and they actually took 3 battle flags into, well, I don't know if they had them by now, but when they marched off in 1861, they marched off with the U.S. flag, the Empire State flag, and a flag from the Europeans, some war in the green flag from the war in Europe. Yeah, they brought from this guy. They were organized by, and somebody gonna have to help me, Frederick G. D'Utassi? In New York, he liked to be called the Count. And from now on, he's known as the Count, not D'Utassi. Apparently, the old boy got a court-martial for incompetency and was removed in 1863. Y'all can go back, or if you're interested, I have the charges. It has nothing to do with Gettysburg, but basically he was exonerated on most charges, and they were like reselling army horses, putting in orders for, this is kind of smart actually if he's guilty of it. He put in, he drew rations for more men than he had. You know, stuff like that was what was occurring out there. And I think there may have been something funky with the payroll that he was accused of. If you've ever been to Harpers Ferry, you know that Harpers Ferry basically sits between three, what happened to the dog? Oh, there he is. It sits between three heights. Can you help me for a minute? And so, I need tall people. Come over here. You're going to be loud. Oh, no, you'll be Bolivar. You're the short one. You go over here. They're the lowest height. You come over here. Just face me. Right here, right here. Who we got tall? Come over here. Face me. Right here. And so, face me. So, I'm Harpers Ferry. And Harpers Ferry is surrounded by three heights. Now, I'm not facing the correct way for everything, but we're not interested in that. Well, you have, on the Harpers Ferry side, meaning connecting with the city, you have Bolivar Heights. Over here, if I'm facing in this direction, you would have the Potomac River running this way, and you would have the Shenandoah River running this way. That's why Harpers Ferry is grounded as an arsenal, because you have water power, people, right? They didn't have nuclear reactors, so you put your power, you need to make something, you put it near water. Okay, so you have three heights. Bolivar, Maryland, and Loudon. Well, the Confederates, when Robert E. Lee comes into Maryland, Robert E. Lee is surprised that the garrison in Harpers Ferry does not evacuate when he crosses the Potomac. They stay put. And that's a big deal, all right, because Lee then has to turn his army back around. And basically what happens, why I have these three people here, is it's a great operation, you know, and pretty, you know, for what they end up capturing, pretty bloodless from a Confederate standpoint. The Confederates envelop it from three different directions. In other words, they take Loudon Heights, and then they come over here and they get on the other side of Bolivar Heights, and then they're coming up toward Maryland. Well, if Maryland is across the Potomac over here, here's your escape route. Some people argue that Dixon Miles down here in lowly Harpers Ferry, dominated by these heights, should have withdrawn to Maryland Heights. He doesn't do that. Instead, he sends a force up the side of Maryland Heights in order to get to the top. One of those regiments that he sends up there is from the future Willard's Brigade. And one of those regiments, the regiment which he sent was not the 39th. The regiment which he sent was one of the green ones. And they're coming up to the top. Now, why Dixon Miles, the garrison commander, did that, I don't know. He had 12,000 men to defend the post. Surely he had somebody that was a little bit better off or more experienced. And these Confederates coming toward them, meaning from the opposite side, you know. Oh, how are you? Did you come by yourself? I need to talk to you about some write-off. Come up here, will you? Stand right here. Mr. Joe. The Confederates coming from behind on Maryland Heights and the Union going to face them, those Confederates are from Lafayette McLaws division. And they include veteran combat units, which for you Gettysburg folks are Kershaw and Barksdale. So anyway, on September 11th, two Confederate forces, Kershaw and Barksdale, began to pressure from Maryland Heights. The Union commander atop Maryland Heights requested reinforcements, and the 126th New York, under Colonel Eliakim, I hope I'm saying that right, Sherrill, was dispatched to the top, and it turned out to be a fateful decision. The New Yorkers were so green, ladies and gentlemen. What did I tell you? They've only been there 3 weeks. That Sherrill has them in the moonlight In the pre-dawn darkness, he has them in the moonlight practicing loading their weapons. That's what we're talking about. And then they're sent to the front. So, who is this Sherrill that's going up the side of Maryland Heights? Sherrill's a congressman, elected in 1847. He becomes a state senator, elected in 1854. He is the chairman of the banking committee, so he must have been able to do numbers right there. It's the bluff on September 12th and spent a pensive evening. The next morning, Kershaw's South Carolinians began to pressure the line. After firing 4 or 5 rounds, the New Yorkers fell back almost to the edge of the bluff. I mean, they're trying, they're shooting, but you can imagine, people. There's no preparing you for combat. Some of you, I probably got some combat veterans in this crowd right here. There's no preparing you for that. All you're hoping is that muscle memory will take over, and the soldier will fight. That's why you train so hard. Now, as they fell back, there was a lull in the fighting. Colonel Sherrill got them back in a line with a lot of exhortations, and the line held. During this short lull, the New Yorkers adjusted their cartridge boxes and talked things over. 45 minutes later, the South Carolinian men, Kershaw's men, came on again, this time with Barksdale's men. The New Yorkers said that, for you combat buffs out there, the New Yorkers said that the second time the South Carolinians attacked, they didn't have any skirmishers out front. What does that mean? They know where the enemy is. And they just came in. The New Yorkers testified that the South Carolinians waded into them and just started delivering volleys. Only disciplined troops can stand there and reload. You can imagine what it's doing to these New Yorkers. Because the South Carolinians are taking casualties, obviously, but they're absorbing them, and they keep firing, and they're probably firing at a better rate, and they're probably firing at greater accuracy. So the New Yorkers are getting mauled up here. So they start to fall back, especially after the Kershaw starts to work around the flank. And I don't know many men from any war that'll take a flanking. Sherrill attempted to rally his men, strolling the line, urging on all with his might while recklessly exposing himself. Well, the inevitable happened, and a Confederate bullet slammed into the side of Sherrill's face. Before the New Yorkers broke, that had to hurt. The Union forces on Maryland Heights eventually had to give way and retreat to Harpers Ferry. Well, once you lose Maryland Heights, thank you for your patience, and I enjoy getting your picture in the mail too. Once the Confederates have gained, now the Union faced this way, the Union still holds Bolivar Heights. Let me get you to step forward toward her. But the Confederates have enveloped here, the Confederates, you step forward, have enveloped here, and now the Confederates hold Maryland Heights. Well, here's the Union. They're down here. So I don't know if my makeshift map is making any sense here. But what happens when you crown these 2 heights with artillery? You have no defense if you're a Union soldier. I mean, you can get hit from behind. The enemy is not only, attacking. AP Hill is coming from this way. If you're fighting over here on Bolivar Heights, you can get hit from behind. From Maryland, it's just, it's untenable is the word I'm looking for. And after only a few rounds, this is why I'm working toward it. It has a big part of the story. I wouldn't spend so much time on this. 12,000 Union soldiers surrender to Confederate forces at Harpers Ferry. It is the largest surrender of United States forces until Corregidor in World War II. That's in the Philippines. 12,000 men wiped off the map. Harpers Ferry, the brigade is paroled. When I say that, I don't mean criminal parole. Parole in the Civil War is where you sign a document and you pledge an oath that you will not fight again until you're properly exchanged. You're paroled. You give your word of honor. They would never do that today. All right? But yeah, the men were horrified to learn as they were going to Chicago that the 126th New York, the people that had been those green soldiers that had been on Maryland Heights, were being castigated in the newspapers and military reports as the cause of defeat on Maryland Heights. The military commission, which was eventually called together, drew attention, quote unquote, to the disgraceful behavior of the regiment. Of course, the report did not mention the greenness of the regiment, the inadequacies of the forces on Maryland Heights, and just et cetera, the obstacles they were up against. It did not matter. While the brigade waited for exchange, one new recruit marching past the camp derisively called the New Yorkers, quote, the Harpers Ferry Cowards. And this is a big point, and the name stuck. It's a stigma, and the men became discouraged. Now let me reiterate this. The only unit, there were 4 regiments in Willard's brigade at Gettysburg. The only unit that was on that heights was the 126th. But the other 3 units, the 39th, the 111th, and the 125th, are all rolled up into the stigma. The brigade, not the regiment, is known as the Harpers Ferry Cowards. This is September of 1862, or the fall of 1862, all right? September of 62 to July of 63 is not that long a period.
No.
It's not. And think about how many battles, I'm going to try to stay on track here. Think about how many battles there were in Virginia between now and Gettysburg, between Antietam and Gettysburg. All right? I mean, these men from New York, through all those battles, never have a chance to redeem their reputation. They never have a chance until June of 1863, when they are finally exchanged a couple months before that, and they rejoin the Army of the Potomac. It is not until the Gettysburg campaign that they get that opportunity. So, they're exchanged on November 19th of 1862. The men were sent to the defenses of Washington. On January 6th of 1863, the brigade got a new commander. The brigade commander was a guy by the name of Alexander Hayes, who's got a statue up there, in case you forget about it. Big bushy beard. This was a good man for the job. Hayes was a strict disciplinarian, but he was fair. He trained this brigade to fight. He weeded out the incompetent officers, and he promoted the good ones. Hence the 39th, right? Consolidates the companies down. If you can't handle it, we'll just consolidate you, right? So by the spring of 1863, Hayes would write, the Harpers Ferry boys have turned out trumps. That's good, okay? And when we do get a chance, look out for blood. The chance came on June 24th when the brigade was ordered to march north with Meade's army. When the brigade caught up with the 2nd Corps, Hayes' seniority got him promoted to command of the 3rd Division. Is it making sense now? All right, so this is where we get into us. In turn, what happens, people, out of 4 regiments, when the brigade commander gets bumped up, Corps, Division, Brigade, Regiment. When the brigade commander goes up to division commander, the senior regimental commander gets bumped up to brigade. See how that does? Senior in commission. And that is going to bring about George Willard, hence the word Willard's Brigade. He assumes command of the brigade a week before this battle. Where I'm talking about, where that white tin is on the other side of that, this is the terrain I'm talking about. I just wasn't going to write you down. Willard has not moved yet. Around 10 o'clock in the morning of July 2nd, the stillness was broken by Confederate and Union skirmishers fighting out in front. That would be at the Bryan Farm. The 39th New York, being the most experienced unit, was dispatched to the Bliss Farm area and eventually joined by the 126th New York. What did Hayes do there? He dispatched the 2 regiments that had experience now. See what he did? The heavy skirmishing on the morning of July 2nd cost the 39th New York 28 casualties at the Bliss Farm. And this, for these other green rookies, is the first time they're seeing comrades being pulled back with, well, they're carrying extra muskets. They're seeing men that were 5 minutes ago healthy and they're coming back with holes in them. And they're seeing, of course, hearing about for the first time dead men. A lot of these New Yorkers, all right? And that's probably not consoling. You got Union troops lining all the way through here on July 2nd. You can look to your right. You people up top can look to your right, facing me, and you can see the monuments going up Cemetery Ridge. You can face to your left, and you can go down through here, and you don't see that many monuments. You mostly see artillery markers. More about that in a minute. On July 2nd, this was the site of Caldwell's division of Union General Winfield Scott Hancock's 2nd Corps. Caldwell's division is in this area. I don't know if they were ever deployed or not. To their left, to your left, the Union left, is going to be Dan Sickle's 3rd Corps. I've said this 1,000 times, but out of 7 Union Corps commanders, Dan Sickles is your only non-West Point graduate. Now, here's your preservation message. My boss says I always need to be more concise, stick to a theme, and give a preservation message. So here's the preservation message. The first 2 I don't know about. Your ancestors did not drive diesel trucks. Your ancestors, ladies and gentlemen, I'm not talking about your Civil War ancestors. I'm talking about your daddy. I'm talking about your mama. I'm talking about your grandparents. They bought you this with their tax money. They paid it forward for you to have the ability to stand here on this day, rainless day, and look up at that high ground right out in front. That ridge that slopes upward. And I saw a presentation one time where, I hate to misquote, but like 20-something different land transactions had to take place in order to get back the original 400 acres of the Rose Farm. Ladies and gentlemen, there used to be a Stuckey's at the Peach Orchard. Eisenhower used to shop there. You know, with little thimbles, you know, Grandma used to keep, you know what I'm talking about? You put in the little things. Anyway, they paid for all that. They wiped off the modern intrusion and gave this back to you. On July 2nd, because of this, on July 2nd of 1863, you get to make the same decision. Dan Sickles is sitting down here where you see that lift off in the distance. And he is a worried man. He has not deployed his corps. He views that the ground in front of him is a better position to occupy than the one he has ordered. He is ordered to connect his right flank. Remember, I'm reversed. He is ordered to connect his right flank with the 2nd Corps and his left flank over here at Little Roundtop. Well, and one of the boldest moves of the war, Dan Sickles, as you all know, is going to take his men from this position and he is going to move them out to that high ground along the highway. The purpose, though, is because of Sickles' move, this is why Willard gets involved. That's the big picture. There's no Union troops where we're about to walk. As we're walking in the footsteps of Willard's brigade. So how does Willard get here? All right, the first thing that happens after Sickles moves out there is that the Confederates come into position. But as you all know, most of you know, the Confederates don't come into position until 4 o'clock in the afternoon, or they don't step off until 4 in the afternoon. When Longstreet and his Confederate command step off, they hit the Union line over there at the base of Little Roundtop, Devil's Den, Wheatfield, Peach Orchard. They hit Sickles so hard, and by this time George Meade has found out what has happened, and he is forced to support Sickles. So Caldwell's division, The men that were originally here are some of the first units that are dispatched down to the wheat field, all because of Sickle's move. Well, Caldwell leaves, and that's a huge gap. Well, they need more men, so they go galloping up. The other two divisions of the Second Corps are under Gibbons and under Hayes. Both Hancock sends a messenger off and says, I need reinforcements. Who can you dispatch? Of course, one brigade will be dispatched from Gibbon, and then another one is needed from Hayes. Who is in reserve in Hayes' brigade? Willard. Reportedly, Alexander Hayes, the division commander, went up to Willard, George L. Willard, and he says, I want you to march, and he pointed in this direction, and I want you to go down there and knock the hell out of the Rebs. Seems pretty plain to me. But, point of order, and we'll move off. Willard's brigade is headed, I don't know specifically, but they're headed to the vicinity of the wheat field. That's where they're headed. But somewhere around 6 o'clock, a couple hours of fighting has occurred. It's really loud down here, and Willard's brigade has been dispatched. They weren't dispatched immediately, but it's coming fast. So around 6 o'clock, I would say 6:30, Barksdale is going to crack the peach orchard. That would put, I don't know how long it took Willard to march down here, but let's say it took him 15 minutes to get here, 20 minutes, maybe 30 getting everybody up. You're probably now looking at 6:30, 7 o'clock by the time these New Yorkers are getting to this spot. All right, so the Confederates, it's very hard for Willard's men to get an eye on the situation. Now this rain kind of helps me a little bit, but the swell, the trees which you see right here, ladies and gentlemen, they would have been lower. They would have been scrub trees. Why is it growing up today? Because we can't, it's a swell, and we can't get a bush hog in there. So it's too many rocks and boulders in there. And anybody run a tractor knows you can't put a bush hog down in there, So, but apparently the park just bought a machine that's going to do it. So,
oh, wow.
Not a bush hog, but one of them, I forget what they call it. It's a mean machine, though. It's got arms on it. It just whacks things as it comes through. Apparently it was developed by a member of the mafia. Okay. Apparently it'll take out anything. Now, out of that smoke is going to be coming what? As the New Yorkers are standing right here. Out of that smoke, ladies and gentlemen, is going to be coming hundreds of Third Corps soldiers back toward this position. Willard deployed his brigade with the 125th New York on the left and the 126th on the right. He held back his other two regiments in reserve, the 39th New York on the left and the 111th New York on the right. Both regiments about 200 yards behind the line. So 200 yards is no joke. All right, so if he deployed, I don't know the exact spot, but if the 125th and the 126th deployed here, what happened to these people? Come on. Just stand here, it's the easiest job in the world. Stand beside her, right there, and then I need 2 more people to stand behind them. Come on. All right. Coming too? All right. There you go. So here's Willard's brigade, right here. Right here, raise your hand. This is the 125th. The 126th. Right here, 125th, 126th, 111th, 39th. Right here. Notice how they have 2 regiments in front, 2 regiments behind. That's the way that Willard deploys them. This second line is 200 yards behind the first line. So I don't know the exact spot, but 200 yards would put the 2 regiments somewhere over in here. The left of the brigade was behind a row of artillery set up by Freeman McGilvery. Hancock ordered Willard to forward his brigade, quote, to the fringe of the undergrowth in the swell to their front. Fringe of the undergrowth is in quotation marks. So what do you call fringe of the undergrowth? It's where you see those trees. That's where he's ordered to take them. Put the trees smaller. and they would have had animals out there. Now, why is Willard deploying behind artillery, ladies and gentlemen? Why is this artillery here? Because there was no infantry. Hancock orders them to halt and then face to the right. When they face to the right, they go from column and they go into battle line. And the 125th and 126th are going to start pushing forward out into this field. And you can just imagine the tension. So, between these three regiments, be about 1,200 men in the brigade coming forward. Now, opposing them as they come out in the field, if you look not at this closest barn, but that red barn up on the hill, that's the Sherfy farm. But there's some bushes. If you keep going following the hill, there's kind of I don't know what that is. I guess that's the artilleryman monument that I'm seeing, that dark thing. Those bushes behind him is the peach orchard. That is where the first significant Confederate breakthrough happens. And that's going to be Barksdale's Mississippi. He's over here. He breaks through the peach orchard, and then he wheels to the left and dresses to the right. And so these Union soldiers out here, when Barksdale breaks through, here's the highway. Barksdale breaks through, and he wheels to the left. Now what am I doing to the Union soldiers where you see those monuments up there?
Rolling them up.
Rolling them up. I'm raking them up. Marches down the road, and basically between this red barn and that red barn, he takes he instead of heading this way, he turns this way. And he's headed right toward us. That's why Willard happens to be at the right place at the right time. I'm going to break for questioning because this is the big picture, and you're not going to get the small picture unless you get the big picture. There are no Union infantry on this ridge, on this portion of the ridge, except for Willard's brigade and past the PA Memorial, small regiment of Minnesotans. If the Confederates get here, look to your left. There's little Roundtop. Look to your right. There's Cemetery Ridge. If the Confederates get here, the Taneytown Road is right behind you. You cut the fish hook in half. You break the fish hook line, and you cut the Taneytown Road. Hancock orders Willard forward. So what you have, I don't know how many men they have. We'll say around 900 men left from Barksdale's brigade, minus losses. But you see, and they would have been filtering in, hundreds of Mississippians starting to filter into that swell right there. But they're discombobulated. A lot of them are out of ammunition. A lot of them are without officers. A lot of units have been intermingled. It's a lot of confusion. Mississippians are disorganized. Willard's men may be green, but they have unit cohesion. So they start down through this area, and they start pushing toward the Confederates. Remember, too, the Union line is dissolving from your left to the right. Confederate artillery began to pound the area. Now that means the Confederates have taken possession. The New Yorkers dressed their lines, including the fixing of bayonets. Quote, "The venom of the old taunt, Harpers Ferry Cowards, which had so long burned in the veins of this noble regiment, now excited them to fury." Remember that, because I'm going to come back to it. It excited them to fury. All right, and now the end of quote. And now these New Yorkers had a chance to avenge Harper's Ferry finally, unbeknownst to them, against a unit that was actually part of their capture. Barksdale's Mississippi. The New Yorkers, and it kind of gives you a timetable. The New Yorkers' advance was impeded by hundreds of 3rd Corps men fleeing through their lines. In fact, the number of Sickle soldiers almost disrupted Willard's line. Hancock himself even added, quote, "shouted orders or blistering curses to no avail." Hancock, I don't know if I said this, Hancock was relieved of command of the 2nd Corps and sent to command the 3rd Corps. which a lot of military observers have noted, Hancock was ordered to give up a perfectly good corps and go take command of one that was in shambles. But that's why Hancock is down here cussing, right? Because this is his new command. Now, here's the interesting part. The 111th New York opened their ranks to let 4 stretcher bearers carry General Sickles, minus a leg, to the rear. We're on the left flank of Willard's brigade. I can't mark the exact spot. Remember, I'm not going to line these people up again. There were 2 regiments in front and 2 regiments behind. I think the 125th and the 126th are already advancing to the swell if they're not already in it, when the 39th, the last reserve unit, is sent out here to take that battery. Why do I make that assumption? Because Colonel Humphreys, D.C. Humphreys of the 21st Mississippi, writes about the withdrawal because the rest of the brigade was being pushed back. So in other words, he's out here, the Mississippians, the 21st Mississippi, he felt he was out here on an island, and he couldn't hold the battery by himself. 26 are coming down through here. These 2 regiments, as I said, the Mississippians are over here. I think they're more concentrated to the left, or where you see the depression. I think the way that they came in and as disorganized as they had to be, because they went through like 2 or 3 Union lines, maybe 4, you know, depending on the fighting withdrawal. I think they were in rough shape, really rough shape. Hang with me, all right? So I put a little bit more than a mob mingling down here, several hundred men. So I put the 125th and the 126th headed sort of this way. Now, that's a problem, because coming over here, not this first bushy tree, but that other one you see off in the distance, we're going to walk down there in a little while. That big oak, I guess is what it is, sticking up out in the distance over there. All right? Coming from that direction and that brown grass behind it is a whole brigade of Alabamians. Well, if you got 2 regiments in front, which, I don't know, what, 600-700 men, you can, and double ranks, you can imagine the front. But if you got Alabamians coming from this way, then you got a problem. Because what's going to happen, the further you advance in that field, what's going to happen? They're going to flank you, right? So I picture the Alabamians coming from this way. Going back to the lineup, there's 2 regiments on front, 2 behind. 39th is left in reserve. The 111th, that's in reserve, in the rear line, as the 2 front regiments move across, they are ordered to move by the right. Eventually they get to the swell out there, and the 111th is able to clear, and they have a 3-regiment front. The reason I say that they cleared the front is, and to reiterate this again, is I think those 2 front regiments, original 2 front regiments, are leaning to the left. Right? And so the 111th is brought up by Willard because he doesn't want those Alabamians coming up here and shooting down the line. If you could imagine such a thing, dashes out in front of the line and is ordering a halt, and that's when the captains, you have to remember that it's loud. The captains would have to come out front of the companies and tell the company to cease firing. It probably took a minute or 2 to get everybody to quit. And then I'm not saying it's deadly silent, but compared to what it was, there's a lull on the field. I don't know who called out ceasefire. Was it Confederates? Was it survivors of the 3rd Corps? I don't know. I don't know who did it. But nevertheless, as the New Yorkers are ramming new rounds home, you can hear the clang of those ramrods inside the barrel, you know, as they're reloading. All of a sudden, out of that fog comes a volley from those Mississippians. And scores of New Yorkers go down, basically along the edge of that swell. Now the soldiers don't need to know now that there's no friendlies in their front. If there are any friendlies in their front still, well, that's too bad. Because they're opening up. And they're opening up big time. And so the New Yorkers start delivering volleys into that underbrush and those scrub trees right there, and they start advancing. One more pass at this. The lull in the fighting allowed, I don't know how many minute or 2 went by, the lull in the fighting allowed the Confederates, the Mississippians, to regroup. Were they in a solid battle line? No, they weren't in a solid battle line. But they were able to reload and they were able to shake out some type of line. So anyway, when Willard starts again toward that, down in that depression, the resistance is harder from the Confederates. But nevertheless, they're driving them through sheer force of numbers back through there. And the whole time, ladies and gentlemen, those Union soldiers are chanting, "Remember Harper's Ferry. Remember Harper's Ferry." And I think they're advancing with zeal. Notice how the depression in the ground, you got to get out on the field, ladies and gentlemen, in order to understand what's happening. Now look at this swell. Now look at the depression and how it feeds into here. I think if I was a commander and I wanted to get my men in shelter as best I could, I'd be in there. I wouldn't be up here. I'd be down there. You want to get them as low as possible, at least in my mind. So anyway, 1st Minnesota's coming this way. Now look at the Willard's Brigade's advance. Look at where the lift is out in the distance. Look at where the New York Auxiliary Monument is, which we stopped at out there. There's where Willard is going to be advancing across the field. If you were standing on this rock, which I would suggest you not do, in 1863, you would have had perfect. You would have had the 1st Minnesota coming right towards you, and you would have had those New Yorkers coming across your front. And so they're going into the swell. Now the reason I put Willard further down and I put the 1st Minnesota further up is the stone that we're about to see. Now the other reason I pulled you over here is because you can't see through that underbrush. Where you see the horses up ahead, I'm not saying they made it that far, but Willard's Brigade is going to keep advanced. So Willard's man pushes through this swell, which would not have been as thickly underbrushed, and they start climbing out the other end of the line, pursuing the Confederates. There's no telling how many they shot in the back. But now Barksdale's men are retreating in full mode. An attack, let me read an account of the attack across this area, and then we'll get to this monument. This is from a soldier from the 111th New York, which had to be in this general vicinity. He said afterwards, "We officers were kept busy closing the ranks as they were depleted and pushing on." Think about that. Not heeding the storm of metal. Our brigade was a large one, and despite its losses, presented a long line of bright bayonets. As we neared the rebel lines, their fire slackened and they began to give back. I have never seen soldiers who would stand and receive a bayonet charge. Their wavering inspirited our men, and we had just got in reach of a Massachusetts battery of the 3rd Corps, that might be Turnbull, which they had left and which the enemy had turned and were using on our lines. When we discovered that we were losing our men rapidly, somebody asked me about this earlier, from the fire of the Union guns in our rear. So we were ordered to retreat. Now this he's writing this at old age. So as we came back, we brought in as prisoners the line of the enemy that we would run over in our forward movement. Okay, as the New Yorkers are retreating across the swell, Willard is apparently trying to rally them. And on this spot, ladies and gentlemen, at least according to the veterans, and this would have been open, and a lot of men would have been able to see this, a Confederate cannonball is going to come from the peach orchard, and Willard is mounted on horseback. And let me get the quote right. When the shell hit, quote, "it carried away part of his face and head, and Willard, quote, fell from his horse instantly dead." The next senior colonel is Eliakim Sherrill. And Sherrill takes command, and you think Willard was inexperienced. Sherrill doesn't have anything. And he just saw his colleague ripped apart by a Confederate cannonball. So you can imagine his mindset. So let's go back to what I said earlier. Here's where they started from, over here. Here's where they've ended up. And Sherrill's sitting here and they're taking casualties, and what do? He has no orders. So Sherrill does the best thing he knows. His boss, Alexander Hayes, is 3/4 of a mile in that direction. That's who needs to tell him what to do, but he's not here physically. So Sherrill makes a decision. The Union soldiers have crossed into somewhere in here, and they're standing at attention. He has those soldiers faced by the right flank, and he marches and starts marching them back to the very beginning of this tour, to where I showed you at the Bryan farm.
Thank you for watching our video. Please remember to like, share, leave a comment, and subscribe. It really helps us grow the channel.